Bookmarks are a really fun, no pressure way of practicing different watercolour techniques. I mean, they're great fun just to do for their own sake, but say you need to practice your masking fluid technique, you could make these bookmarks and you'd have something nice at the end to give to a friend or use yourself, and you will have practiced and learned more about using masking fluid in your watercolours. So I like to think of bookmarks as really a posh swatching exercise. It's the sort of thing you might do in your sketchbook, but this way you get something rather good that you can use at the end of it. My name's Liz Chaderton. I'm a watercolour artist based in Berkshire, and every week I share a tip, trick or technique that I wish I'd known about ages ago. This week it's going to be making bookmarks and practicing our masking fluid technique all at the same time.
All you need is a strip of watercolour paper that's approximately 5.5 centimetres by 20. That's 2.2 inches by 7.9. Or you can get these little watercolour pads from Hannah Muller, so they're already cut for you, and it's really nice 100% cotton paper. That's up to you. I would suggest £140 and just a knot surface. I like to tape mine down so I get nice clean edges. That's personal preference. This is just masking tape. And then you'll need some drawing gum or masking fluid. Now this is funny stuff. If you've not used it before, it is strange. You can get different sorts. This is a Pabio drawing gum, and this is my favourite of a least favourite supply. Masking fluid preserves the white of the paper. It can be tinted. I've got a blue one here, or it can be colourless. Again, choice is yours. It's easier, obviously, to see if it's slightly tinted. You can tint your own by just putting a little bit of watercolour in there. You put it on the paper, it dries, and you can paint over it, and then when you peel it off, when it's dry, look, it becomes all gungy like this. You peel it off your paper and you've got pristine white left. You must be so careful not to put it on with your decent brushes, because it will clog your brushes up and it's a nightmare to get out. What I like to use is this that I've just been stirring that pot with, and it's called a colour shaper. It's a little silicone wedge and you can get quite a fine line. You could use a mapping pen, a ruling pen. You can get masking fluid with a little sort of needle tip to it. And what I'm going to do is put a series of lines across my bookmark, and I'm thinking of them like a landscape. So far away at the top here, they are going to be closer together, and then they will spread out as they come towards us. Some will be at angles. Some will be straight. Some might be curved. Some will intersect. And these are like the boundaries of the fields. So they get bigger as they come towards us. So let's do that again. We've got our horizon. Maybe do this one a little closer. There doesn't have to be a lot or rhyme and reason to these. Just a pleasing pattern, imagining a landscape, a patchwork of fields. And one of the good things with masking fluids, say you do a blob that you're not happy with, don't panic. As soon as it's dry, you can peel it off and no one need ever know that you made a mistake. When you finish, make sure you put the lid back on, because this will dry up eventually. You know, after you've had it about a year, you'll open it up and it'll be a big blob of congealed yuck. Well, at that point, you just throw it out and have to buy yourself another one. If you've used something like this, there's no need to wash it. You can just let it dry and then peel that off.
The masking fluid's dry now. If you have got any blobs that you don't like, for example there, you could just peel it off now and it really wouldn't be a problem. And I thought I'd do one sort of more spring colours and one more autumn colours, and I will use this as an opportunity to clean up lots and lots of dirty palettes. So my spring colours, what would you say? A spring, we'll have a lovely blue sky. There we go, one blue sky. I'm going to paint each little section that I left a slightly different colour, thinking that it will get slightly darker as I come forward. And the little lines of masking fluid should keep those sections fairly separate. But if they don't, they merge into each other. Is that a problem? I don't think so. Just being aware of more intense colours maybe being a bit closer to us. It hardly takes any paint, so say if you are cleaning palettes, you can do that now, and we'll let that dry. This one's going to be more autumnal, so I'm going to give it a yellow sky. Now I did smaller sections here. I'm using a size, oh, it says a 10 brush. It's quite a small 10, so size 8, something like that, because yes, the sections are relatively small, but they're not exactly tiny. Again, you probably want more intense colours coming to the fore. If you don't like what something's doing, remember you are in control. This might be loose watercolour, but you're still in control of it. I think that's a sort of yellow ochre. That might be quite nice for my autumnal feel. And this one, I think it would also be quite nice to deliberately let some of that orange go in there. Again, we'll let that one slightly merge. I might just darken this one down a bit. No idea what that colour is. You want to fill all the spaces, because if you leave any white and then you take the masking fluid off, all you'll end up with is a white line on white paper, which obviously won't show at all. When you're happy with the effect, we're going to let that dry. With that layer dry, all we have to do is rub off the masking fluid. Now, if you don't like the feel of rubbing it off with your finger like this, you could use an eraser, or you can even get special tools called masking fluid pickups. Just do it gently, because there is always the outside possibility that you're going to rip your paper. Masking fluid does that. If you've left your masking fluid on your paper for a long time, it sort of bonds with the paper and it can be hard to remove. So my tip would always be to remove it as quickly as possible. Now what I'm going to do is mix up some dark green, because I imagine this is a patchwork of fields all separated by little hedges. So I am going to do some trees and hedges. We said it was sort of springtime. So near to me, I might have a slightly bigger hedge. Do a bigger tree. I'm just using leftover bits of paint still. And then as they go further away, they might get slightly paler and less detailed. If you do trees, try and leave gaps in them, just because that gives the birds somewhere to fly. By the time we get back here, you're going to need a steady hand, and it's really just going to be little lines. If you do them like this, it naturally gets a bit paler each time. You could do some trees that break the white lines like this. Maybe not on every one, different shape ones. These are nice tall poplars. Those are quite fun, aren't they? Should we do some more of those? While it's still wet, we can drop in different greens. Just breaking that up a bit. And I wouldn't over sweat it. I mean, I don't think we need much more than that for our little landscape, but it's rather fun. Let's do exactly the same here, but in this case, because it's autumn, we'll make sure our trees are all lovely autumn colours. So again, just carefully rubbing off that masking fluid, and let's get some lovely autumnal colours. So grabbing oranges, quite like the trees breaking through. Might still have some green because it's not totally autumn, and we know that'll all mix in like that. Maybe on this one I won't do every single line. Maybe I will, who knows. If you need a smaller brush, just grab it. If you accidentally go over a white line like I did there and it upsets you, then just lift it away while it's still wet. That'll be fine. Colours are always a little cooler and paler. And even though this is a very stylised landscape, it'd be quite fun to just be aware of that. I'm just dropping in a few colours, wet in wet, while I've got the opportunity. If you want to, you could even do something, right at the front. You could, in this case, because it's autumn, do some ploughed fields or some marks like that.
Now these are dry, we need to remove the tape very carefully. Masking tape can be tricky stuff. It does sometimes stick to your paper and rip it, which is really upsetting. So if you're not sure, warm your tape, and that slightly melts the glue to remove it. There are two little landscapes. If by any chance you have scuffed the edge of the paper when you're taking the tape off, get the back of a teaspoon and just burnish it down and it should be fine. If you haven't got the edges terribly even, you can of course just trim off a teeny weeny bit. If your paint has seeped under the tape, which sometimes it may do depending on your paper, don't panic. Grab a little bit of white gouache or even something like a white acrylic marker and just touch up the edges. Then what I like to do, I've got a little corner punch that just rounds things off. So if you like that look, they're not expensive. We need to think about how we would protect this, because say you're reading your book in the bath and you drop this in, it's watercolour, it's going to go everywhere. So what I like to do is use a wax. Now this is to go over chalk paint. It's clear, it's sort of furniture wax. You can use Dorland's wax, which is a fine art material, but given that these are bookmarks, I don't think we have to go to that expense. This is far cheaper. You could just varnish them, you could laminate them, you could even get special little plastic sort of folders to put them in. I personally don't like plastic. I think they look far nicer as paper, and I find this wax just protects them beautifully. So I put on a tiny amount. It's a very thin layer. I do the back as well. Again, if you are sensitive to chemicals, if you suffer from eczema, anything like that, do wear gloves or use this with a cloth, and then we let that dry. Shouldn't take long given how thin that coating was. The nice thing with wax is that it actually enhances the colours as well. It doesn't smear the watercolour because there is no water in the wax, and watercolour is not wax soluble. If you did this with, I don't know, oil pastels, it would smear, but watercolour, it doesn't.
Once your wax is dry, we need to buff it, and there's no secret to that. Just take a lint-free cloth, could be old t-shirt, could be, oh, I don't know, a tea towel. Wipe it over firmly. If they are a bit bent from the treatment that you've given them, obviously just weight them down under a heavy book and they'll soon flatten out. If it still feels a little bit sticky, it needs to dry further. Do that both sides. Then if you're going to put a tassel on, and I do like a tassel, just mark where you want it to go, whether you want it actually in the painted area, or if you've got thicker borders, you might want it in the border. That is your decision. And then use a hole punch and just punch your hole. And you can buy tassels like these online for just a few pence each. They are not expensive, and I think they make it look really nice to finish it off. So you can choose one that you think coordinates or contrasts. Well, actually that brown's quite nice with that, isn't it? That orange is a bit lurid. I think that green. Ooh, what about that one? Yeah, actually that's nice. If you don't like tassels, obviously leave them off. If otherwise, you could use a thin bit of ribbon, loop it, put it through the hole, put the ends through, just as I'm doing here with these tassels. I just like the tassels because I think they add a little fun. Our two bookmarks where we have practiced our masking fluid technique and created something pretty that we can give away. If you've enjoyed these bookmarks, I've got lots of other tutorials. I've got one where I show you this lovely wet in wet floral technique. I've got one where I show you more landscapes. This is line and wash, and this is line and wash with a little bit of collage. I've got one which is a texture technique using stencils. This is modelling paste, and these are rather fun. This is reverse stenciling, so it's a good opportunity to practice your backgrounds. It's got lots of salt in it. This had cling film, and then you lift the paint through a stencil, create some really lovely different bookmarks. So I hope you get as addicted as I do, and I hope all your friends like them when you give them to them.